Hello, my name is Anoa Changa.
The Way with Anoa. The Way with Anoa.
Hi, everybody. Surprise. Monday night. Oh, yes, me and Noah. How are you guys doing? Welcome to this Monday night special edition of The Way with Anoa. I am here because I have a really awesome guest that I just connected with on the fly, and we're going to talk to you about something that's pretty cool that's going on. You know, there's a lot of talk about what do we do now? Where do we go from here? How do we resist Trump, or what's the next step? Do we re-enter? Do we form a third party? What do we do? Where are we at? So there was a piece written about 2 weeks approximately after the election. It was in the Huffington Post. It was called "Sanders Can Be the Lincoln of Our Times." And the idea is that, we could basically, we're ripe for starting a People's Party, a new party. If you heard my previous interview with Shama Sawant, she also talked about that, how we really need to have a party of the people, for the people, by the people, that's people-driven power, right? Because that's the one thing that we've seen so much over this election cycle, is that when we all come together, right, and not just, the standard bearers of our organizing movements and stuff, because there are a lot of awesome people who have been out there grinding for years and years and years and years. But when all of us rise up and actually recognize the power in our individual voices, when we bring that together, we do amazing things. Shout out to all the Bernie crats out in California that totally killed it this weekend. I love y'all. Y'all are so amazing. You just don't know. Shout out to my people in Florida who are grinding out. Their chair races going to happen, or their chair elections are getting ready to happen this week. Washington State. There's so many of you guys all over the place doing wonderful work, and you're awesome. So I get to talk to someone else this evening who's also doing wonderful work. Because it's on the fly, I'm not in my usual location, so please ignore the light switch in the background. My kids are in my normal space, and they're refusing to give it up. But you know how that is with teenagers. But I'm really excited because I get to bring to you Nick, Brana or Branya? Brana. I'm all over the place tonight, but it's okay. I have a little bit of caffeine rush going on. Nick, how are you doing?
I am great, and thanks for having me, Anoa.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come and chat with me. I know, like I said, this is on the fly, but I really appreciate. Shout out to Pamela Johns for connecting us. Thank you so much. Someone else grinding and doing a lot of great work on behalf of Progressive Army. So Nick, tell me just a little bit about yourself, and then let's talk about drafting Bernie for a People's Party.
So I was on the Bernie campaign. I was National Political Outreach Coordinator, which meant I was in charge of working with the superdelegates. Mm-hmm. I organized Bernie's political meetings. I did a lot of convention work towards the end. And after that, I joined Our Revolution as a founding member, as electoral manager. And I was there for about a month until I resigned with the group of about 8 who resigned afterwards.
Okay.
And since then, I've maintained this. I've always been telling myself, okay, now I'm going to pause. I've maintained this kind of of just going and continuing to activate. And after the election, I just thought, well, I had worked in the party for several years before that. I had worked on other campaigns, establishment Democratic campaigns. But the election, I would say, and what I saw in the Bernie campaign from working with the party establishment, party elites, the superdelegates, is that there is no future for progressives in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so that's the sense that a lot of us get, is that there is no future, that it's not for us, that there's not, no matter how many positions we get here and there, maybe at the state, local level, people can do something, but when we're really looking at that national party apparatus, there's too much entrenched power with certain, political elites as well as certain members of the donor class to really get the change we need. So what do we do?
It's absolutely true. I had conversations during the convention with a number of state party chairs and also state executive directors, and they told me, they admitted to me, they said, you know what? The National Party has been essentially writing out the state parties for many years, and the state parties have lost influence. The national parties, as the party itself has become more centralized within these institutions like the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, and so I thought that was a pretty powerful admission from folks who were leading those institutions to begin with.
Right.
And so I echo what you just said, which is that I think that the national kind of party apparatus is something that has made itself kind of impenetrable to change, and it's survived many progressive movements before us who have tried to reform it. And that was basically the genesis of my article on this idea, which is I thought, well, when I looked back at this history, and I've been looking back at it for a while, and the experience in the campaign as well, I thought that this is what the progressive movement has been trying to do. Basically, it's been our focus to reform the Democratic Party for decades. And movements, millions of people strong, like the anti-free trade movement in the 90s, the Jesse Jackson campaigns, the movements against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And throughout all of it, the Democratic Party has just moved to the right throughout without any kind of reflection. Not that those movements haven't scored any victories at all, but the general trend has remained to the right. And so after the election, I sat down and I thought about this, and I kind of looked at the history of the formation of third parties in the past, and I saw that there was a successful model for the creation of third parties. And it's when a popular politician and others around him who support him within one of the old parties decides to break from the old regime and takes an existing following of millions of people and creates a new party. And basically, Bernie is the person who fits that description like to a T today. And he could do it. That's actually the way in which the Democratic and the Republican parties were founded. And so, they began as third parties, each of them. And so I think we have that opportunity again today.
It's so funny, like when you break it down and explain, because most people, I don't think, remember that we had like the Whig Party, for example, right? We've had so many other original parties that no longer exist. But it's really funny when you put it like that the Democratic and Republican parties were both, they're now our two major parties, but they were once new startup third parties themselves. And we've already seen both parties, like you said, go through so many changes, even in, the later part of last century. I mean, again, you brought up Jesse Jackson's campaigns of 84 and 88. And we did see the response, with the Democratic Party under the leadership of Bill Clinton going that centrist third way kind of center right direction. And we haven't really ever come back from that. And there has been this progressive wing that's kind of been beating its head against the wall. Like, come on, why don't you understand? Even this conversation we're having right now about whether to fight for saving the ACA or should we be arguing for a different option like single payer? Like there's just so many different battles going on right now. And I think like you said, the primary process in the election cycle, like even with ultimately the DNC and the Hillary campaign choosing to kind of try and swing right versus embracing more of a left progressive platform to really engage and mobilize people. It seems like the final death knell has been dealt to that way of thinking. So how do we, so let's talk about drafting Bernie. How do we actually, we can petition him. I know many people tried with petitions ahead of the election to get him to run third party, but he gave his word that he would support the nominee if he ran as a Democrat. And while, we may not be happy about that decision, I did respect his decision because it's what he always said he would do. But how do we now, even though he seems committed to reforming or saving the Democrats, how do we now get him, and that inner circle, Nina Turner, so many great, wonderful, notable people. How do we get them now to move towards breaking away like Republicans did from the Whig Party example?
I think that during the campaign, Bernie called so many of us to action. He really inspired so many of us. And I think now it's our turn. Having worked in the Democratic Party, I know that party is a black hole, and the rationalizations of big money and the rationalizations of getting involved in the bureaucracy and all this, it sucks you in, and you start to think that way. For example, like on the campaign, we understood you take the big money, that's corrupting. That influence is corrupting. Now, without it, nobody asked us, nobody sent out any memos, nobody inquired at all. But the movement has kind of lowered its standard, at least as far as kind of Bernie's concerned. And by that, I mean that they've said basically, no, there's a group within the progressives who are saying, well, maybe it's okay to take the big money, as long as we use it for the right things.
Right.
And I don't think that's true at all. I think that we had it right on the campaign. You can't take the big money and at the same time pretend to be independent. That's what everybody in the establishment says. That's what Hillary said. So right. I haven't heard anyone within the Democratic Party, be it Ellison or anyone, really proposing to get off of what the heart of the problem is, which is the big money, which is what we really need to do. And so I think that takes a new party. And to get to your question about how we do it, I think Bernie will do it. If you go back, anyone who's gone back and kind of read his quotes from the 70s and the 80s and even the early 90s, when he was in the Liberty Union Party, then he was mayor of Burlington.
Right.
And when he started his congressional career, Bernie has a very good understanding of how the two-party system works.
Right.
I mean, he just has some scathing quotes against them. He talks about how the Democrats are an ideologically bankrupt party, how their ideology is opportunism, about how you can make the argument that the two-party system is a sham. And so he has that understanding. He had it before. And so I think the way that we draft him is that we have to go to him, and we have to go to the Nina Turners, and we have to go to the people around him, and we have to tell them essentially that this isn't working. We have to remind them. We have to remind them of what we were aspiring for on the campaign.
Right.
For. And if we build enough of a movement within his followers, enough of a campaign, a large enough campaign, then I think Bernie will listen. Because right now, as far as I knew from when I worked with Bernie on the campaign, Bernie is very concerned with splitting the vote when he thinks that there isn't enough of a contingent that can make it successful, a third party.
Right.
And so now we've reached that level. We've reached that level that the Republican Party reached in 1854, where they could actually overcome the Whigs. And so it's up to us to show Bernie that, Bernie, we're ready for this, and that we don't really have confidence in this approach of working inside the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has done everything they can to show us that they don't intend to change. They've gone out of their way to show us that.
Right. Absolutely agree. I think what you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, the idea, and that makes sense about not wanting to split the vote. I know that was part of the fear too, going into this election cycle. When we have another quote unquote Nader effect, which is totally whatever. I think something that people often overlook with third party voters is they're already not going to support, neither of the main party. Generally, most people who vote third party are not going to support, the main party candidates. Right. They're committed to their third party vote for their reasons and values, etc. But I think what you just pointed out about how we have finally reached basically a critical mass where forming a viable third party is possible, particularly when you look at the numbers, how the numbers break down. I mean, the numbers break down with only approximately 50% of the electorate, the eligible electorate, actually engaging. That's not including, the number of people who are disenfranchised through voter suppression, or those, former people who are former felons who have their right to vote taken away from them. I mean, there's so many other people out there, or those who just have not been engaged, whether because they weren't touched by any of the campaigns, or they're just not engaged because they lost hope in the system. It just seems like there is, not just from those of us who've been active and engaged or, willing to support Bernie, but just there seems to be a ripe opportunity to work with groups to actually reach all these other, constituencies that have been basically left out by the both major parties as well.
I totally agree. And what I realized when I started writing the article was, if Bernie was to, and I think this has become even more true in the past couple months, if Bernie was to break from the establishment parties, he would take with him half the Democratic Party. And I think that's a conservative estimate, because the Democratic Party, in its effort to market itself as something progressive, has made Bernie kind of the mascot of their party.
Right.
And so I would say half the Democratic Party you take automatically. You begin with that when you start a new party. You add to that all of the anti-establishment voters. You add to that independent voters, people who couldn't even vote in the primaries. You add to that young people. You add to that people who've given up on the system and who aren't even voting anymore. And you add to that, when you look at how popular Bernie is in Vermont, he's very popular with conservatives, actually. His appeal cuts across party lines when people get to know him. So you add all of these conservatives that would have voted for Bernie. And all of a sudden, you have something that is much larger than the Democratic Party. And what happens then is what has always happened in U.S. history, is that the spoiler effect kicks in. And that because there's only room for two parties in our electoral system, then the left unites around the largest party that it has, that has always happened in our history. And so essentially what happens now is that this new party, which represents working people, the People's Party, that replaces the Democratic Party as the party on the left. And what happens once you've done that is you're left with a populist party, a populist left party that is faced with, as its opposition party, this kind of extremist neo-fascist party on the right that has just gone so far off the spectrum. And I think that would be a complete redefining of our political system at that point.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm just thinking about some of the criticism that we already have about the Democratic Party, and some criticism that was leveled at the Bernie campaign as well. There's this, well, I'll start with the Democratic Party first and then I'll go to the second part. So, like where this Democratic Party is supposed to be like this big tent party, right? Everyone's welcome. We address all these issues, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, a very small portion of the issues or concerns of people are actually, addressed with. How do we have a populist movement? How do we have a populist party that really does actually get to the issues? Are we basically looking at building a party around the platform that Bernie put forward? Or what are your thoughts about like how we actually start to address the differing experiences and maybe agenda items of this very diverse group of people? I mean, talking about conservatives from Vermont and Southern Black progressives. I mean, you might have, well, actually, they are actually probably not that far off, because I have a couple of my brothers from Alabama who love to go shooting and hunting. So there actually might be some overlap there. Shout out to Mike and Jesse Smith. So, but I'm just thinking, like, we have so many different people, and we saw that in the Bernie campaign, despite all the different criticism and critiques about, Bernie's campaign being so white. We did see a variety of people come together, particularly when you look at everyone under 40, 35, 40, it was a very diverse coalition. So how do we kind of, like, as we're building out this movement, how do we learn from the mistakes of the Democratic Party and how not to do diversity, and how do we do it right?
I think that's a great point. And that's why no one person should be in charge of the People's Party. Whether it's Schumer or Bernie or any of the kind of heroes who are around Bernie, of course, like Nina Turner, like Rosario Dawson, like Tim Canova.
Right.
The platform, as I see it, would be essentially designed at a founding convention, and it would be designed by members of the party, as would the party's processes. Like, one of the things that is so undemocratic about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is the way that its leadership is elected, and simply the accountability that the leadership has, which is next to nothing, because the Democratic Party doesn't want engagement, because that's not part of what our system is supposed to produce. You're only supposed to come out every 4 years, every 2 years, and kind of pull a lever. You're not really supposed to be engaged in politics kind of in a long-term and active way. And so we would design the party processes. And as I see it, we would design a system where the leader of the party, like the equivalent to the DNC chair, would be selected essentially by the members. There would be members who vote on those positions, and as they would vote on other key positions kind of in the leadership of the party. And there would be ease. This is something that we should have kind of in our democracy in general, I think, too. There would be ease of recall. So if an individual who is at the helm of this new party essentially has no confidence of the members, then the members could recall that individual and elect someone else to replace that person. And so there's kind of instant accountability that we don't have here. And so it's very important that all the characteristics of the party, I think, to learn from the Democratic Party's mistakes, like you say, which has become more and more centralized, as I was saying before, that this new party essentially be democratic in character throughout.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like something that also would be more engaging and getting people to buy into, right? Because that's like we were just talking about. The way it's set up now, it's like, okay, you just need to show up and vote, and very few people show up and vote during primaries or midterm elections, and just, a little bit of an uptick during a presidential election cycle. But I like what you're saying. It sounds pretty cool. But so looking forward, right? How do we then begin to engage? What does the process of engagement look like? I mean, because there's a lot of people who have kind of gone off. I mean, there's still a pretty much collaborative, group, but you have different, things, and so you have Progressive Independent Party, you have a couple of other different party that have started. I do like the PIP model with our, PIP. You guys have talked about PIP before. Erica Bloss has been on, because that seems to be like a collaborative coalition type of an initiative, right? Where it's not that they're necessarily trying to rule one ring to rule them all, but to bring people together to talk about what that would look like and how a coalition can be built with people from all these other different faiths. So how do we begin to engage people and kind of bring together that action, that movement to build this People's Populist Party?
That's what Bernie did, which was so beautiful and so remarkable in the campaign, is that all of these different groups that had never been kind of united under a single umbrella came together in his campaign. And so the diversity of those groups, both in background and in ideas, was something that that gave it so much strength, I think. And so I see Bernie as having created the party already. During the primaries, that was the alliance right there. That is the party. That is the coalition. All we need to do is essentially formalize it in kind of a more permanent institution. But you reminded me of something that I think is very important too, which is in these kind of third-party efforts, as we're looking to bring people together and form that kind of big tent. I think any successful third party needs to answer two questions or overcome two hurdles.
Right.
And the first one is that of critical mass. Is how do you simply reach the requisite number of people, and how do you build something that's large enough and appealing to enough groups that that you can kind of overcome the Democratic Party, that you can reach the level where you can replace one of the establishment parties, like the Republican Party, Lincoln's Republican Party did for the Whigs. So that's the first hurdle, reaching critical mass. And then the second hurdle is the closest thing to a movement leader that we have right now is Bernie Sanders. And right now, Bernie Sanders is working inside the establishment parties. And so you basically have to either recruit Bernie to join us, or you have to show that Bernie won't do it, no matter how badly the party treats him. And I strongly believe that he will do it, that he will respond if we recruit him. All of my experience with him on the campaign, with his history, tells me so, including kind of the way that I believe that they're thinking right now. And so The draft Bernie idea to me is so appealing, the idea of drafting him to create a new party, because it addresses both of those key hurdles in one, and so it's really difficult for the Green Party to take on those two. But this idea really gets to the question of critical mass, and it also goes to the question of basically what do we do with our movement leader who is presently kind of hacking away at this impossible task of reforming the Democratic Party, which has been kind of which has been the graveyard of so many progressive movements before.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I believe when I talked with David Cobb in the summertime, early late spring, he said something to the same effect when we talked about the Green Party and other initiatives and stuff too. So just thinking about just final what as we wrap up, like what do you think is most important that people know? Where can they get more information or get involved if they want to volunteer?
I suggest that folks read the article that I wrote back in November. It's kind of a blueprint for what the new party could look like, how we could build attention for it, how we could build a following, and it talks about, it addresses kind of all the common criticisms like the spoiler effect and splitting the vote, and basically makes out the case both from kind of historical standpoint and also from my personal experience within the campaign, working with party elites, working with the superdelegates, seeing the attitude of contempt that they have towards us. So I really suggest people read that. And then I'd also suggest that they can come find us on Facebook. We have a group, Draft Bernie to a People's Party is what the page is called. And we're also working on several other exciting projects, including a website, other social media accounts, and some things that I presently, some of them I want to leave as surprises.
Okay.
And I'd love to talk to you again after that because I think
definitely
it will be exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think I'm really excited because we'll both be at Occupy Inauguration next weekend and an Occupy Inauguration Summit next Sunday. But I definitely want to, hopefully we'll get to chop it up then, but I definitely want to follow up with you once things get rolling a little bit more. And I'll definitely I've shared the article, and I'll follow back up to share some more stuff from you guys. But I do definitely want to hear more and help share information however possible. So I really appreciate you for coming on and chatting a bit for tonight. It's awesome. Thank you.
Oh, it was great. Thanks for being such a big kind of advocate of this. I really think that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I think the number one takeaway is that we need to have a conversation this time, because we're following the path that so many progressive movements have followed before. Yes. And it has ended in absorption, co-optation, and essentially in the party continuing this mammoth continuing to the right. Mm-hmm. And so this time we really need to stop and think about what it is we're doing and really assess our options on the merits and think, okay, what really is it best to do? How can we learn from the experiences of those who came before us? And also, where are we now and what do we have available that we didn't have before? So I would say that's the most important thing, is simply I'd like to spark a discussion within the movement about where it is we should go. Should we form a new party, or should we try this reform approach?
I absolutely agree. And yeah, I believe in good conversations, and you're right. There hasn't been a conversation. It just seemed like convention up, we lost. Okay, everybody get in line. It just things have moved so fast, and there hasn't been that. Okay, let's breathe, let's strategize, let's be strategic about this, and let's think critically. And so I do appreciate having this conversation, and I'm definitely interested in having a follow-up conversation, and I do look forward to meeting you in person next week. And so thank you again for joining me tonight. That's great. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Anoa. It was a pleasure.
No problem. So this has been my little special for Monday night. Shout out to Nick. Nick didn't have a show tonight, so he graciously let me have his Monday night. So I'll be back on Wednesday. I think this Wednesday I'm going to actually be joined by David Cobb, former campaign manager for Stein Baraka and former Green Party. I think he was Green Party presidential candidate back in 2004. So David's been on the show before, so David will be back on Wednesday, I think. But this is my little special. Ben is coming up in a few minutes, so I'm going to get out the way. The one thing I just want to leave everybody with is that, we need to continue to think critically, be proactive, engage, figure out what's the best place for you to get in and fit in, and listen. But don't just listen to respond, listen to understand, because that's how we all become better and our movement becomes stronger. So I'm out. Talk to you later. Peace.
The way.